So Luther has a huge, what is angst, or just the German Angst, same kind of thing. Luther has a very sensitive conscience. And so I'm not a sacramentalist. I understand Luther's sacramental position, though, because what he's trying to do is make salvation objective. He knows if any part is up to him, including his faith, he will screw it up. If any part of it is up to him, including his repentance, he will screw it up. If God demands perfection and I'm a sinner, if any part of that is up to me, I will screw it up. And so the objectivity that he's trying to bring is because I think he rightly understands what the Bible actually commands. Okay, so here's something I think interesting with Luther. We minimize biblical commands to make them possible. I don't think that they're meant to be possible. So the command is sell all that you have. And we say, well, give to the poor. The command is to be ye perfect, as God is perfect. And we change that to try to be perfect. That's not the command. The command is to let no unwholesome speech come out of your mouth. And we say, well, just don't say the F word. The command is to not even to look upon a woman with lust is committing adultery. And so what we do is we take these commands that are meant to be not difficult, but impossible, and we weaken them so that we can do them. So we can pat ourselves on the back and say, progressive sanctification. See, I'm being holier. Luther rightly points out God's commands are not meant to be difficult for the believer. They are impossible for the believer. You say, Zach, they're not all impossible. The command not to steal, I cannot steal. Luther would say that's not the command. It's to not steal while loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Yep. Perfectly all the time. Well, then I can't do that. Even me not stealing, I'm not doing it to God's glory. I cannot cheat on my wife, but I can't not want to cheat on her. And so I'm still sinning either way. So what Luther correctly understands is God's commands are impossible. And even the ones you think are possible because you have to do it with a perfect heart as a sinner are also impossible. What that does is that creates a sense of hopelessness in self and a high sense of hope in the cross. And that's the focus. So for Luther, there is this, and this is really big with him, as you know, the theologian of glory versus the theologian of the cross. It turns worldly thinking on its head, and the focus is on what Christ has done for you. It's all other-centered. Now, the Reformed tradition would agree with a lot of that. They wouldn't agree that all God's commands are impossible. There's a tendency when you read Calvin, when you read a lot of the guys that come after him, especially the Puritans. Everybody loves the Puritans, and they have some good theology in some points, but when you actually read them, they're really anxious about their own salvation. There is this focus on me getting better, me fighting idols. And so anytime you go down the sanctification route, there's a tendency to look at self and say, how do I get better? And Luther's not saying forget sanctification. He's saying, what if you just looked at Christ the whole time? It's not what if I look at myself one time and even Christ 10 times. You're still looking at yourself once, which is a loss. You're a loser all the time and you suck all the time. So you don't have to look at self. That's already a given. What if sanctification was just looking at Christ and that naturally made you kinder, more gracious, wanting to help the poor, etc., instead of trying harder? So I think you're right. I think what happens with Calvin's quote even about your heart being a perpetual idol factory, there's a tendency to always look in. Whereas Luther hates looking in because he just goes, yeah, I'm terrible. And when the devil accuses me, he actually hasn't gone far enough. When he says, when the devil accuses me, tell him I also have shit in my breeches. He is saying, I'm worse than even the devil condemns me of. Yeah. You don't get that kind of stuff with the Reformed tradition. You have a tendency to say, I'm a hopeless wretch, I'm a worm, so I will read more and I will pray more and I will fast more and I will try to get rid of my vices.